I had a band in high school, my first real band that actually started gigging all over the place. And it was called Electric Spaghetti. And I remember we did a it was, named after the cables on the floor of your practice. And we did a rehearsal gig at a house party that went killer. And then we got a big gig at the Omni nightclub in Oakland, which is a big place it's not there anymore. It's something else now, but it had a U-shaped balcony around the top. It's kind of like a smaller Fillmore auditorium kind of thing, ballroom. And it was owned by John Nady. And he invented the Nady Wireless, which was the first real wireless unit for musicians so they could run around without a cable. Ironic for a band called Electric Spaghetti. It was really cool. So you got to use a wireless when we played there. So we came in, it was like kind of like the curtain came up, like it was kind of like a real performance. And we're playing all songs. I had written like 95% of the music. And I just had this feeling as I walked out on the stage, like I felt like we were playing at Madison Square Garden. Like I could just see we're going straight to the top, man. Like not in an egotistical way, but just like I felt like the music was so pure. Like I felt like this is what we need to do. And then on the next song, suddenly I had no sound.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, but we are getting off the Bruce train. We're getting on a Starship, I guess we could say. We're going to talk a little Eddie Money. We're going to talk Two Live Crew. We are definitely going to talk Kristen Chenoweth, because I have a musician, a writer, a podcaster, Jude Gold, on the show today. Jude, welcome to the show.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for having me, Jesse. Really, really cool podcast. And happy to be here. And you're just, it's like asking a surfer to talk about surfboards or whatever, man. I'm just good times.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It is. I'm always thrilled and happy that the amount of people that I reach out to and I go, hey, do you want to talk not just necessarily Bruce, but music in general? And almost majority of people like, yeah. What's really interesting is like sportscasters, or I had a few politicians that have joined me. Like, you aren't wanting to talk about sports, though you and I talked for a few minutes before we hit record. No, I just want to talk Bruce, or I just want to talk music. So it's a fun conversation.
I'll talk all of those things. Yeah, I love that stuff. I used to do some gigs for the Cal Bears. I went to Cal Berkeley.
Yes.
And then later on, about 10 years after I graduated, one of the coaches or the managers of the team, they were doing a lot of bowl games.
Yeah.
And we do this big party. And the coach, part of the deal was he would fly us down there, and it would be just a killer gig. Wherever we stay, killer hotel, San Diego, like rooms overlooking the bay. And I think Cal won 2 out of those 3 bowl gigs that we did, which was great. Big after party. And the manager guy, he's the biggest Bruce fan I've ever met. And then his only thing is that he gets to sing 8 Bruce songs. So we play a Bruce set all night. The horn section from the marching band playing Bruce lines, like on 10th Avenue Freeze Out. And so I always enjoyed that. And
that sounds fun. That sounds great. Well, Jude, why don't you give us your elevator pitch? Tell us a little about yourself.
Oh man, where to begin? I mean, I don't know. I just remember I always loved music. And then my dad would play guitar sometimes for the class. He'd come to my 2nd grade class and play like freight train, run so fast. Like folk songs, a little Bob Dylan, maybe a little why can't a dish break a hammer, kid songs.
Yeah.
And I loved the music, and I loved the soundtracks for my favorite movies. But then when I was like 8 years old or something, I heard Michael Jackson shake your body down to the ground. It wasn't just Michael Jackson, it was the production, it was the Quincy Jones, like it was like a lightning bolt went through me. And ever since that moment, music has just been my thing, hands down. And I've just gone on to play guitar and all kinds of different scenarios. I love just about every genre of music. I love to play every different style. I've played in so many different bands over the years, and I record, and I ended up working at Guitar Player magazine, which is which was kind of a dream gig for me, because as a kid I used to read that. And as you probably know, I played with Jefferson Starship for the last almost 10 years, touring all over we've done like 5 continents, and we play all the time, even now. And very lucky to be playing right now with the way the world is with live music right now. And we put out a new album recently called Mother of the Sun. So that's the not very short version, but
No, that's pretty succinct. I just we ran into each other on Twitter, and I reached out to you, and I was so thrilled you had. And this is one of those things where, like, I don't even know where to start, but I am going to start. You're already talking about your dad, but so I take it music was big in your household growing up. Just all kinds of music, or?
Well, kind of was, but
yeah.
My mom had an acoustic guitar that I still have. That was my first guitar, a Takamine steel string Martin copy. And she also played piano and still does. My dad hasn't touched a guitar in probably decades, but he used to have one when I was in high school, and he lived in this apartment building with the best acoustics in the hallway. So that's probably the most practicing I ever did, was like that summer of 10th grade. The acoustics in their room were so good. I'd take his acoustic guitar down there, and people be walking up by and stepping over me, but I just couldn't leave because it sounded so good in there. So that's about the extent of their music,
Mm-hmm.
And my brother, he's a film editor, but the music for me, I just couldn't keep away from it. And I even went to music school. UC Berkeley, as I told you, got a music degree over there.
So, I have a real good friend named Tom Zoller, who is an artist, and he's has worked for several comic book companies. He has written My Little Pony stories, and he has done self-published and done a lot of works himself. And when I talked to Tom, he's like, from the moment he picked up a color, he knew that's what he wanted to do for his life. I mean, that's the only thing he's wanted to do, is to draw for a living. Sounds like that necessarily may not be you, but something about that Michael Jackson song flipped a switch on you. Can you explain why? What about that made that change in your life?
Well, the only thing, there's like 2 things that preceded that.
Okay.
Like, one was, I think I discovered my first roller coaster, the adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
Another was seeing Star Wars when I was like 7 years old. The first one came out. Like, there had never been a movie like that for a 7-year-old boy. Like, it was kind of life-changing. And the adrenaline rush in the music too. I always love the music. John Williams' score. I mean, you can't underestimate how powerful. I'm not really a fan of all the other Star Wars movies, but that one, the first one that came out, it changed all of our lives as kids. And then I just got some of that same adrenaline feeling when I heard that production, and I heard the energy in MJ's voice. Like, he's so rhythmic.
Yeah.
And it was like a really fast thrill. I used to like skateboarding and stuff too. It was like that same feeling but times 100. And then immediately it was like, kind of like, oh, now I know what the fuss is about. Before I was like, why are adults and teenagers so into music? Like, I don't even, like my friend, she had wanted to find the song on the radio. And I was like, let's go out and play. And like, it was like a sunny day. I remember so vividly. Yeah. She's like, no, I want to cruise the dial and see if I can find this Michael Jackson song. I was like, what? To me, it was like Partridge Family or something, or like, I didn't even know what she was looking for. I thought it was going to be so cheesy. And she freaking found it like in 10 seconds. And there it was, through some great speakers. So it was a transformative thing. And I got that feeling a few times over the year. My first rock concert, saw like AC/DC, and I got that feeling again.
Yeah.
I had no idea the power of a concert. And I've only seen a few bands that I think like compete with what Bruce probably does in front of an arena or stadium. Makes a small place, like Prince. Huge influence on me. I love Prince, so I got to see him. Pete Townsend from The Who. When I saw him in the 8th grade, I was 13 years old. There was no jumbotrons back then. This is at Oakland Stadium where the A's play. It's like a 70,000, and we're in the upper deck watching. But he could fill the place with his moves, the way he would jump around and do his windmill strums, with this with his right arm. Those were energetic moments for me, and I just feel like Bruce is one of the kings of that, even though I have yet to actually see a Bruce concert.
Yeah, now that's interesting because and I've had that a couple of times, where people have massive fans of his music, but just never worked out a live gig. Was there a lot of debate in your heart, like going to school? You're like, I'm going to go to university. I'm going to study in music. I mean, that, the dad in me is always like, oh, are you going to make a living in that? But was this something just a calling to you?
It's interesting because my mom, she wanted to be in anthropology or archaeology. She wanted to be an archaeologist, and her father, my grandfather, rest his soul, great guy, but he was like, do something sensible. Mm-hmm. So he never really encouraged her. So she made it a point to make sure that me and my brother were 100% encouraged to do whatever we wanted to do for, for better or for worse. So there was that. But it's just funny about keeping in school. The guitar ironically kept me in school and out of school at the same time, because we had this great class called classical guitar class. All you do is show up and the teacher would like practically throw a nylon string of guitar at you. Just get out of my hair. As long as you just like gave it back and didn't break it, you got an A for the semester. I must have taken that like 5 times.
Yeah.
And then you go there at lunchtime, it's so important to like have something that kids love to do at school. Like music is such an outlet.
Right.
And sometimes I'd grab the guitar and then I'd be playing at lunch and we'd be jamming. And then like suddenly 7th period came around and like, I don't think I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna stay here at the best stairwell, another great stairwell. This one had a window overlooking the courtyard, and nobody went up there, just covered in graffiti, the walls, and we would just jam up there. And then sometimes I'd be all by myself, and then I'd cut 8th period, and sometimes I had a 9th period cut. So I'm in school, but I'm actually playing guitar.
Yeah.
And so, my junior year, I did really well. And my senior year, I did pretty well. But like so I kind of went to UC Berkeley to just prove to myself and to my mom that I was smart or whatever. But I'm not smart. I still don't believe. I'm far from smart. I'm not saying that. But
yeah,
it was almost like I wanted revenge on my high school years. So I wanted to get a degree, from a great university. But in retrospect, the guitar is the greatest teacher that I've had, and all my musicians that I've met playing it,
When did you know you wanted to create music? Like, I understand going to school and it sounds like you're playing a lot of music and learning, but when did you first have that idea of, well, maybe I should be involved in the creativity part of this?
I mean, as early as I can remember.
Really?
I was writing songs and always writing guitar licks, and if not entire songs. And I rarely wrote whole songs, but I probably have 3,000 licks that I've written that are either half a song or whatever that I could play for you right now if I could just call them up. You know what I mean? Like they're in my fingers. And I had a band in high school, my first real band, that actually started gigging all over the place, and it was called Electric Spaghetti. And I remember
great name.
We did a it was named after the cables on the floor of your practice room. And we did a rehearsal gig at a house party that went killer. And then we got a big gig at the Omni nightclub. in Oakland, which is a big place with it. It's not there anymore. It's something else now, but it had a U-shaped balcony around the top. It's kind of like a smaller Fillmore auditorium kind of thing, ballroom. And it was owned by John Nady, and he invented the Nady Wireless, which was the first real wireless unit for musicians, so they could run around without a cable.
Right.
Ironic for a band called Electric Spaghetti.
Yes.
But it was kind of a big deal. Now you can get a wireless for $50 basically, but it was really cool. So you got to use a wireless when we played there. So we came in, it was like kind of like the curtain came up, like it was kind of like our real performance. And we're playing all songs. I had written like 95% of the music. And I just had this feeling as I walked out on the stage, like I felt like we were playing at Madison Square Garden. Like I could just see we're going straight to the top, man. Like not in an egotistical way, but just like I felt like the music was so pure. Like I felt like this is what we need to do. And then on the next song, suddenly I had no sound. And we were freaking out. We are so young. We're just kids. I'm like 17 and we don't know how to. Took us a while to diagnose the problem. And I had not plugged in one of the cables. It was totally my fault. I hadn't plugged in. It wasn't the wireless's fault. And I just like kind of ever since that moment, like it's been a lot of hard work. Yeah, I swear to God, if that one cable had stayed in there, I could have just ridden that feeling all the way. But the life doesn't work like that, and you get that inspiration, but then something else has to keep you going through all those trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
Something's true. I mean, I've just always just been very thankful, and I wish for everyone else too, that everyone can have something they truly love. And I love, even if I'm sitting on my couch, if I get into the zone, I'm just as happy doing that as any other gig, playing guitar.
Yeah.
Talking about, just sitting here.
Yeah.
If I get in that zone and I start writing, so that's what I've been doing all this time. I'm still just that 8th grader who's just rocking out and annoying other people in the house with the guitar.
Yeah, that's funny. That's great. Did you talk to me through, like, it sounds like very early you were performing quote unquote professionally. So you get your degree. Where's the next step in your career and path? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, in high school, the band we would just do a lot of club gigs. There's a great place called, there's one place called 924 Gilman in Berkeley, which is a famous punk rock kind of like club where anyone can play. It's almost like a community center for kids. It's probably literally saved hundreds of lives, I think. It's a little warehouse where you could write graffiti all over the walls, right? I mean, obviously people tend, in that kind of situation, people write cool graffiti. They're not writing horrible stuff.
Yeah.
And you can climb up the walls and the ladders and stuff and write. And basically, as long as you could show up and do a gig. So we would play there sometimes. And, Green Day played there a lot. The Green Day is probably the most famous band that came out of there, but a lot of other bands. And, but that was not really quite professional. In my first professional gig, I got hired by a Nigerian band leader named Jeffrey Omondebu. We played like high life and Afro funk. And I learned a lot about groove and rhythm guitar, and soloing. The first gig, we got paid $100. I was like, oh my God, got paid to do this.
Yeah.
And I just played in a lot of bands while I was in college. That's why I stayed. I grew up in the Berkeley, Oakland area, and I went to Cal Berkeley because I wanted to get my parallel education playing in clubs and in bands at night and starting to learn how to record music and do all that stuff. And then finally, after I graduated, best thing I ever did was quit my day job. And pretty soon after that, I was teaching at this school called Blue Bear. And then, I'll tell you this, my first real gig, I was helping produce a project. And then the artist wanted to use this fantastic guitar player named Garth Weber, who's played with Miles Davis and all this stuff. I'm like, kind of feeling like a little nervous, like, what are you going to need me for if you have him? But we hit it off, and I learned a lot of stuff from him about playing guitar and recording guitar tracks and choosing stuff that kind of fits in with the vocals instead of stepping on the vocals. Really good stuff. And at this point, I think I was 26 or 27. And then he got a call to go play with Melvin Seals and JGB, which are the former members of the Jerry Garcia band.
Right.
Jerry had already passed, but this band, and they tour all over the country in a tour bus playing a lot of nice gigs. And he said, you know what, I'm not going on the road. Why don't you go down there and audition? So he sent me down there and I auditioned, and there was a few different people down there, but and the guy before me was so good. I don't know his name. I was like, there's no way I'm getting it. But I went in there and I played. And then I remember a year later, I asked Melvin, why did you hire me? He's like, oh, because you were playing a solo and it was good. But then in the middle of it, you kind of jumped a little bit. I remember I kind of hopped 2 inches off the ground because I must have been really into this one note or something. I was just so funny like that. I don't know if that just stood out to him, I guess. And he gave me a shot, and I did that for 3 years, going around the country and playing in a that was a great band too, because lots of big solos for everybody. So you can do your own thing. The jam band fans and the Grateful Dead fans are just the best.
Right.
They just are so supportive, and you can play on stage wearing sandals. It's awesome.
One of the things you telling me the story, I thought of the Ken Burns documentary about country music that was out a couple of years ago. And he talked about Western swing bands and how that they are similar to jazz quartets without you thinking it, because the Western swing bands would have solos, right? Like the same way a jazz ensemble would do it, they would do where you'd have, a fiddle solo or a steel guitar solo or whatever. And so similar to a jam band, right? This is from all the way back to that jazz roots where you're kind of jamming and going through that.
I love that stuff, man. It swings so hard, and it uses a lot of the vocabulary of bebop and swing jazz.
Yeah.
But it's got the steel instruments and stuff. Yeah, I love that stuff.
That's great.
I've transcribed a bunch of that.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about some of the other people you've toured with, but how did you start writing, Jude?
Oh, you mean journalist?
Journalist writing. Yeah.
I think, it's I kind of knocked going to school for it took me 6 years to get something like that.
Yeah.
I kind of sometimes ding it a little bit, but it really was an amazing thing because I really learned a lot of the rules of music, and really learned how to learn the laws of harmony. There's no laws, but tendencies of harmony, and also how to write music and music theory and all that. And then of course, I always love to write. Writing and playing music are very similar. They use similar muscles in the sense that if you want to get good at guitar or writing, it's a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
Sitting there with your guitar or your laptop or whatever, or when I was in high school, just 1,000 crumpled up pieces of paper. I could never stand turning in an essay that seemed like it was stupid or I didn't have it together. I couldn't stand that feeling. So sometimes I'd stay up all night, and it was terrible actually. But I always had a passion for it. And then ironically, so the college thing really helped me, I think, because when I always loved to write. And then I was being interviewed by some little paper in Michigan or something, and then I thought that was cool, and then I asked the person, hey, could I submit something about writing, just adventures on the road?
Mm-hmm.
And she said sure. So I wrote up this whole thing. I spent 5 days on it, and then I sent it in, and nothing ever happened. So then I said, heck with it, I'll send it to the Relics magazine, which is the jam band magazine. And to my surprise, they totally took it, and I started writing for them. And then the schooling actually helped me build up some skills that I actually ended up using when Guitar Player magazine finally needed a full-time, assistant editor, which I became an associate editor. That's a full-time gig where you're doing music and interviewing people and writing articles. I've always just loved doing it. But I'll tell you this, the difference between the guitar and the writing is the writing is really painful at first. It's just But at the end, I have some of the same feeling as when I finish recording a song with a guitar. But recording the song is more fun all the way through.
You know,
at the beginning of writing an essay or an article or an interview, that's the hellacious part, when you just got this deadline staring at you.
Aaron Sorkin, who talks about that blank page, that the just getting it on there. You were talking about the amount of work and solo. I read a book this summer by the writer J. Michael Straczynski, has done Babylon 5 and Sense8, a lot of other stuff. And he wrote a book called Becoming a Writer, Staying a Writer. And one of the most interesting chapters is he did a chapter on editing. And the whole chapter is actually, he would do the paragraph and then he would scratch through everything. He showed the paragraph in its beginning form and the ending form. That whole chapter was shown that, like, I want to show you how much work I put into this. And, he gave the advice, you come in as late as you can in the story and you get out as soon as you can in the scenes,
That's cool.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because, I know they've talked about, you've probably seen the Beatle documentary, right? That's on, where they show Paul playing around, with the song, and all of a sudden this classic song comes out. And you're like, how did that happen? My wife talks about the story that my mom came to visit. One of the first times we had moved to Dallas, she came to visit, and she took this big bowl that we usually put popcorn in, and Linda said she threw flour and she threw milk and she threw butter and she threw this stuff, and all of a sudden there's this pan of biscuits and all of them are in the same size, and she didn't have any dough left over. Like, it's magic. How did you go from there to there? And I think about that sometimes with creating, whether it's an essay, an article, or a song, right? It's that magic. As Bruce says, 1 + 1 = 3.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But
yeah, go ahead.
It's exactly right. It's like, I mean, it's not quite as simple as molding the clay, as they say. Sometimes I feel like it is like archaeology sometimes, or it's like a puzzle sometimes. Like you interview a great artist and you've got 30,000 words or something that you need to take down to 5,000 and have it flow. And you really got to try to figure, what is the story? It's like unlocking a mystery. What is the theme here? How does it open? What's the first sentence? What's the first thought? How do we get in here? How do we get out of here?
Yeah. How do I capture the reader so that they will stick with it, especially in today's clickbait society, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, just give me the facts. It's going. Was there a moment, Jude, when you're starting this journalist career where you had to pinch yourself and said, holy crap, I can't believe I'm talking to blank?
That's a good question. I think a lot of them were in-person interviews, but this one was a phone interview. I remember it was connecting to the big publicity firm in New York, and they're like, okay, we're connecting you. Hold on. And then there was like a 6-second pause. I think one of them was probably in Scotland where he lives, and the other was in Australia. And there they were. And I got nervous for a second. I was like, am I even going to be able to speak?
Yeah. And
it was Angus Young and Malcolm Young, who left us a few years ago, the two guitarists of AC/DC, which are just two of the most influential guitar players in rock history, hard rock, at least in more than people know. Just the way that those riffs and those huge chord progressions and big drums, and that was a real thrill. And I got to talk to them a lot.
And didn't you say that was your first live show?
Yeah, that was my first live show. So, I moved on to obviously to a lot of other different bands from them, but seeing them was mind-boggling. I remember just walking in there like, God, I hope the music is loud enough or something. Wow, was I in for a shock? I mean, I almost got killed by the crowd in the front. It was standing room only, but it was an adventure that changed my life, just to seeing what was possible, and just the emotion that I don't think anyone in that place felt the guitar riffs more deeply than I did. Of course, that's just my own self-centered viewpoint, but it was just like a religious experience, the power of electric guitar and a good vocal on top of it, and a lot of people singing in unison. And so that was a real thrill. I had a fun time telling AC/DC too, because by this point I played in probably 36 different bands or something. And not to mention all kinds of just miscellaneous gigs. But before tribute bands were a real thing, my friend, we're sitting at the cafe, he's a jazz drummer who basically hates rock and roll. But he had this he's like, dude, we got to start a Star Wars AC/DC tribute band called R2DC. and the name was so good that he was into it. And it was like a performance piece, almost performance art. Like we did the song, we mashed up the music. I was the musical director and mashed up all the music of AC/DC and Star Wars. Like I'd put the Star Wars themes over you'd hear like the main theme of Star Wars. What's the one that goes?
Yeah.
And put that over Back in Black, the groove. And we had a horns players playing it, and we had like this girl playing trombone. She had a full C-3PO costume with the trombone. It looked so cool. So anyway, I got to tell Angus and Malcolm about that. That was at the end of the call. I kind of told them. They were cracking up, man. I made them laugh. They were like, man, we've heard of so many bands but AC/DC tribute bands, but nothing like that one.
That's awesome.
So it was a great moment. And then, so that was probably the one that stuck out the most in terms of feeling like adrenaline rush before they got on the phone.
Do you I always think this, do you still get nervous before a gig?
It depends on the gig.
Yeah
It definitely depends. I mean, that's one thing that people might not always realize. Like, you could see a 12-year-old kid who's been playing music and maybe he or she's even in a rock band and they play, and that's one thing. But then at Christmas time, the whole family's gathered around, and grandma and Aunt Cindy or whoever. I just chose that name because I have an aunt named Cindy. And or whatever, and you're just a kid and everyone's like, oh, so you play the guitar. Can you play us something? Like that's like more nerve-wracking right there, probably for a little kid than because what do you play for that situation? Then actually getting on stage and playing what they've rehearsed and practiced with a band. So it all kind of depends on the situation. But I don't get too nervous. But like I do a lot of fun stuff too. Like our singer Kathy Richardson for Jefferson Starship, she does solo shows too. Mm-hmm. We just did a solo show in Chicago on Saturday night, and we did like a whole bunch of songs from Pink Floyd The Wall, but there's zero rehearsal. You just have to kind of show up, and you got to know it inside out. Like this is something a lot of pro musicians have to do. You got to be able to show up somewhere fully ready, no matter what happens. You don't want any train wrecks. So that would be a little more nerve-wracking than a gig that you've done a lot. We were all kind of thinking about it, like, hope this flies.
Yeah.
Hope we don't crash and burn on any of these tunes.
That is one of the things that I'm amazed with is the idea that, like a few years ago, Bruce and the E Street Band were doing Stump the Bands, right? Like he's picking up signs from the crowd, and they're all over YouTube, and some of them are obscure, E Street Band songs, and others are just songs that he played as a kid, and just and to see them kind of talk to everyone like, okay, this is how we're going to do this, and then all of a sudden they play, and you go, that seems magic for someone who's not musical like I am. I do a little singing. I've sung in the church choir when I was in a high school and stuff, but I can't play any instruments or everything. And the idea that you can get together and just jam that way or do something is just, it really does seem magical to me.
It's a lot of work, learning songs with well, there's different situations. Like, yeah, I don't envy, little Steven if there's like, can you play this one song? Like he probably knows them all inside out.
Yeah.
But then there's like my friend Justin Derrico and Dory LaBelle, they play guitar on the Voice, the TV show.
Right.
They often have to learn 25 songs, after they just did the same thing. They had to go home, and it's like, that's a lot of work. That's like, you don't have a life until they're done filming that show for 3 months or whatever. Like, it is brutal. So there's all kinds of different levels.
I can imagine that. The story, right, is that when Tom Morello was touring with the E Street Band, because little Steven was off filling Lillehammer, right? Like, a song came up and he said, "Oh, good, it's one I know," because most of them so that's great. How did you end up getting with Starship? You said back in 2012, and I also want to hear how have you guys been doing with COVID? So let's start with how you got there, and then I want to talk a little bit about just the trials of being in live music during this horrible time.
Yeah. Wow. So anyhow, Jefferson Starship, I was, well, it's funny because the drummer of Jefferson Starship when I joined was Donnie Baldwin, great drummer. He's played with so many great bands. He plays drums on the famous song "Fooled Around and Fell in Love," Elvin Bishop.
Yeah.
He played with 38 Special and Van Morrison and all this, but he was in Jerry Garcia's band the last 2 or 3 years of his life. And then he was in that band that I joined. So I knew him and the same manager for Jefferson Starship. So then suddenly, 15 years later, Kathy's doing a festival gig in Indiana, and she invites me, and I'm just like, because we had 2 shows around that show. I was sure I'll come hang out,
Yeah.
And I get pulled on stage by the other guitar player, Mark Slick Aguilar. He played with the band he played, 25 years. I think he has the record for the longest tenure of a lead guitarist.
Okay.
And then, and it was cool. We jammed out, and Slick was great. He wouldn't let me off the stage. After a while, I had to just kind of sneak off, basically.
Yeah. Right.
And then we did that again in LA a couple of years later, a year later. They were in town, and Kathy invited me, but I was just walking out the door, and she literally called me. She's like, "Bring a guitar, damn it!" I was like, "I just want to chill. Are you gonna make me play?"
Yeah.
I'm not trying. I just wanted to, but it would turn out to be really fun. I could play with the band again. And then 4 days later, they said, "Hey, Slick can't make it to. There's a tour going to Israel and Italy and some of the States. Can you hop in and fill his shoes?" Because he ended up getting a complete liver transplant, and he's fine now. It's like an amazing thing. It took him like 3 years.
Yeah.
To go through the whole process. He came back and definitely played a bunch of shows with us. But in that meantime, they kind of tried me out, and it just kind of stuck. And then there was another tour after that, 3 weeks later, and they said, "Hey, you want to do another tour?" And that was like a month in Europe, going all over the place. And then we went to Japan, and that was with Paul Kantner. He passed away in 2016. Right. He's a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. Him and Grace Slick, she's wasn't with us, although she's hung out with us a few times and taken us out to dinner a few times. Actually, we co-wrote a song.
How fun!
Kathy, Grace, and I. Well, Grace contributed all the lyrics, and then Kathy and I wrote all the music too. And I wrote the main music theme and stuff. But that's a side story. So, and that's how I ended up cruising around with the band. And it's been, almost
all over
10
the
years
world,
now.
Right?
Pretty much, yeah. Asia and South America and Israel and Europe, Canada, Mexico.
Yeah. So how has COVID affected you guys? It sounds like you just had a gig. I had tickets for 2 or 3 shows, and then COVID hit, and then it took 2 years later before, I finally got to go to the gig. So talk to me about how that's affected you guys, and just, I can only imagine
But,
how weird that is.
yeah, it has been like a time warp.
Yeah.
I remember, yeah, about March 12th of 2020, we were about to go get on two planes, stop over, and then like a 2-hour drive to a gig in upstate Wisconsin. And then Donnie, the drummer, was like, guys, what are we doing? Like, there's this. So we decided to pull out of that gig. And then the next day, the whole world just shut down. You know,
Wow.
remember that day? Like, it was like a
Yes.
Friday. It was like a Friday.
Yeah.
Everything just, it was pretty much. And then that was a really strange experience that I'm still processing, like a year of quietness, not playing. But then June of 21, we did our first we did 2 gigs during the full lockdown.
Okay.
And one of them was one of those drive-in sorry, not a drive-in theater, but it was a big parking lot where they set up a stage like a drive-in. And we played, and then people flashed their lights and honked their horns. And so we did one of those, a little strange. You know, you'd think that a bunch of people honking horns and stuff would be really loud, but it just kind of wasn't that loud really, because it's like spread out over it was just very strange.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
You're afraid to get near anyone because they're, you know, kind of going outside your bubble or whatever. But that was like in the summertime, and then we did one show, but we didn't really get started till June of 21, and we played a private concert for the Bissell Vacuum Cleaners Animal Charity.
Okay.
And they have an awesome airplane hangar. It was great. Kathy grabbed a vacuum cleaner and started vacuuming us on stage, chasing us around. It's always some crazy stuff happening around on our shows. There's a lot of spontaneity. You know,
that's fun.
Kathy's good at making the room feel like a cozy environment, just like Bruce would. And so we've been playing our asses off, man. We have 12 shows in March coming up, and we played probably like 30 shows or 40 shows.
Wow.
From like July to December. I would say probably 30 something shows. Some nice big shows with like double bills with Foreigner and other bands, Blue Oyster Cult. And we've been really working on. There have been some shows that get canceled though, because people are hesitant sometimes. Well, they get postponed. They're all contracted shows. So
yeah,
like we're supposed to play in Hawaii on Saturday night, but it got moved to November.
Okay.
But the tickets are so damn cheap to go over there. I'm going anyway.
Oh, okay. Good for you. Yeah.
I love Hawaii. It's just a quick jump from the West Coast.
Yes. Good.
So, but we've been playing. We just got a cruise ship coming up with Deep Purple and a bunch of other bands coming up starting February 14th. We're also playing the Flower Power Cruise. And you know what's interesting? You talk about things getting postponed for years. We were so psyched that we have like a 16 date arena tour supporting Deep Purple all over Europe, which was for the fall of 2020. Well, it got bumped to the fall of 2021. Well, then it got bumped to this year, but it looks like it's finally going to happen. October of this year, we should be playing that run of all these Enormo domes. And that one's special to me too, because one of my biggest influences and a guy that I'm proud to say I've befriended over the years after interviewing a few times and also opening a couple shows for him with my other little duo I had.
Yeah.
Steve Morse, who's the current lead guitarist of Deep Purple. He's been that for like, I don't know, 25 years or something, but people still think he's the new guy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's funny.
I know the feeling.
Are you the new guy on the band for Starship, Jefferson Starship?
I definitely was for a while.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's settling in a bit now, but there's a great legacy. It's funny that the band didn't really have too many guitarists. It was pretty much Craig Shakiso, who was a definite influence on me when I was younger. I saw them in the 8th grade. Craig was great.
Yeah.
And then it was pretty much as far as long-term guitarists, it was Slick.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of the third one.
Very nice.
But there's also Mickey Thomas, who was in Starship. He also has his own band called Starship, featuring Mickey Thomas. And and he obviously has a great band too. Great guitar player, John Roth.
So we'll change your caps for a minute and let's talk about your podcasting. So I understand you have a podcast. Talk to me a little bit about what it is.
Oh yeah. I mean, I really like it because I just really felt like it fills a niche in the guitar area, which is, I would always, first of all, it's called No Guitar is Safe. And I started in 2015. And the inspiration really came because I would interview lots of players for Guitar Player magazine. And sometimes they'd be really playing focused, but nonetheless, you end up with a print article where you're reading somebody's words talking about guitar. But I'd be in the room with them face to face, sitting in a chair, sometimes jamming with them, listening to them play, an incredible guitar player just playing for you.
Yeah.
Like Nile Rodgers, for example, my first influence. And if anyone doesn't recognize that name, well, he's one of the most successful producers. He produced David Bowie's Let's Dance. He produced all those hits from when I first turned on the radio, it was like Hungry Heart, Bruce Springsteen. Like after it got that Michael Jackson thing, it was like, oh, I'm into the radio. And I remember that was the first Bruce Springsteen song I remember. And then there's like We Are Family and all that. And there was like, oh, Freak Out.
Yes.
Which was chic. That's what made me want to play electric guitar. Oh, Freak Out. There's that lick.
Yeah.
I'm trying to play extra loud so this guitar comes through, but it's kind of a subtle lick.
Right. Yeah.
And I just was, and so, but to interview him, I'm giving you this long answer, but
no, it's great.
I went to his office in New York one time in like 2006 or something, and he's playing for me. I'm like, this is where people need to be, in this chair that I'm sitting. The article's cool, but this is way before podcasts were really cool. And then, so in 2015, I was like, man, I started listening to podcasts because, because I was always driving around. That's what you do in LA. Right. Especially if you come from the Bay Area and you move to LA and then you're driving back to the Bay. So I've been in LA now for 12 years. And I just like, man, podcast is the perfect way to put somebody in that seat where you're with a great guitarist. They don't have to be world famous. I've had a lot of great guitar players like Phil Collins from Def Leppard or Ace Frehley or all these a lot of guitar players that people might know more if they're actually a guitar player, like everyone from Joe Satriani to Session Cats, Lady Gaga's guitarist, Tim Stewart, like all these, dozens. Put them in that chair where you can hear them actually tell you what they do, or this is the first lick I ever learned, or that lick came out of this lick, or the inspiration for that, or I used to always play, Albert King lick.
Right.
Whatever, they just put you like the way two guitar players hang out. The podcast is a perfect format for two guitar players hang out. You can't have two athletes hang out on a podcast. They can't do anything for you.
Right.
You can't even really have actors. They can maybe do a little in person, a little acting or but basically the guitar, I think it's hard to name a better use of a podcast because guitar players love to sit there and show you what they do and trade licks. So that was the whole goal with it. And it's all about sitting down in person, which has become a little more difficult with COVID. Yeah. But sometimes I do Zoom, but Zoom's a little difficult because you can't really jam because there's a little bit of latency.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's just something really close to my heart. I just got to get the story down. People seem to resonate with it. Like, you're actual guitar players playing.
Yeah. No Guitar is Safe is the name of it. That is very cool.
And by the way, I did recently have Nile Rodgers on, my childhood hero. I interviewed him again.
Yeah.
And he plays everything. He shows you everything. He shows you how he came up with the chord progression to Let's Dance, David Bowie, and all the chic stuff.
Oh, wow.
It's, it's great. I love all that stuff. Or,
yeah.
My buddy from Maroon 5 talking about all that. It could be anything. I'll have anyone on there. The other day, we had a day off in Florida. We played New Year's Eve in Florida and Sarasota. And the next day was a day off because we were playing on January 2nd. somewhere else. So I'm walking around St. Armand's Circle, which is near Lido Beach, outside of. I sound like an expert on the geography, but I was just there.
Yeah.
And this kid named Gustav Viemeyer, I call him a kid because he's 26 years old. He's just blazing on the street, playing his ass off, playing like Django Reinhardt kind of gypsy jazz mixed with other kind of stuff, and super energetic. And I had him on the show. So that's kind of the idea. No guitar is safe. Well, you could be from Def Leppard, or you could be somebody busking. If you're doing something amazing,
you want him on the show.
I'll bring him to the listener. So it spans the whole gamut. No one is safe. If you're doing something, I will find you.
Good for you. Absolutely. I was, when we first reached out, I looked in your Wikipedia page, which of course is never wrong. It's the internet. It can't be wrong. But it says you toured with Kristen Chenoweth. You were played. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that. That's kind of fun. That seems a little different than your normal gigs.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're a working musician, like, you'd be surprised how many different styles.
Exactly.
Really, like the bass player on that mini tour that we did with Kristen, like, he's known for playing like Rat and other bands like that.
Yeah.
Like hard rock bands. He's the funniest guy in the world, by the way. But so his name is Robbie Crane.
Okay.
He had me I'd just be suffocating with laughter, like having dinner with him. Like, it's so important to have people like that just make you laugh so hard you just forget all your problems.
Yeah.
And and he can adapt. So people will adapt to,
right.
We love it so much. We're chasing the fire, wherever we can get close to it. But yeah, my friend Joel Hoekstra, very great guitar player. He plays in Whitesnake now and Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And I think he plays with Cher still. He's done a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Somebody asked him if he knew a guitar player in LA. And so I get this call, and it's like, hey, do you want to do a bunch of TV stuff with Kristen Chenoweth? We did like the Tonight Show, Jimmy Kimmel, the American Country Awards, and which was on broadcast live. I think that was the most fun gig, because it was a song called I Didn't. And there might be a link to it on my website, which is just judegold.com.
Okay.
If anyone's curious. Where you can see me play a country guitar solo with Kristen Chenoweth. Like, I get a little moment. It's a very cool little moment in that song where there's an actual full-on guitar solo. It's actually played by the great studio musician Brent Mason, who's one of the greatest guitar players on the planet. But he's not on the road with her. Yeah. So we're the road band, and I got to have this little Brent Mason moment in front of like all the cameras flying around, and like there's all the celebs in the front row like watching us play, and that was a really cool moment. Somebody told me at the end, like, who knows about the country stuff, he's like, can't believe you got a solo. Like, usually they don't give solos to just background musicians or hired guns. They usually have to be like a Brad Paisley,
right, or
a Vince Gill or something to at least, or one of the band members. So I think I got really lucky that night. That was really fun. But yeah, we did Leno and Kimmel. I got pictures sitting at the desks, and
oh, how fun.
They're pretty mellow. They're surprisingly mellow, those shows.
Yeah.
First TV gig I ever did was playing in the local news station in San Francisco, and I was just so nervous. I find out though it's actually pretty mellow.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's nothing going on there in between, and then you just kind of play, and then it's over. And I guess if a band really messes up on like a late night talk show, you can just stop, and then they have to let you do it again. Then they'll edit it together later.
Exactly.
But there's no reason to mess up. They keep the studios really cold though, so
I've heard that from other people. Yes.
Which means you got to keep your guitar in there. If you're playing backstage and then you go out to play, you're getting all the strings when they go inside the cold air. This happens to electric guitars.
Yeah.
They will contract and go sharp and go out of tune. By the time you're like halfway through the song. So it's little tips like that for playing TV.
That you learn. Very nice. Jude, you've so far, amazing career. So as you pick, as an musician, as a podcaster, as a writer, and maybe all three, what are goals you have? What are things you're chasing? What you want to do in the future?
Well, that's pretty easy as far as on the artistic side.
Yeah.
I'm the world peace side. I don't know how quickly I'm going to be able to help that happen.
Right.
But as far as my own personal stuff, I definitely have a sound in my head. I do like a lot of slap kind of guitar that I kind of developed in my own little take on kind of percussive guitar. It's kind of influenced by the funk and disco and Earth, Wind and Fire and stuff. That's the stuff that I really grew up on, or
okay.
I have certain, like, you check out my video Funky Town.
I saw that. It's very cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's like that's kind of an example. Like, I have this sound in my head. I kind of want to do a proper album. I put out like 5 or 6 of my own solo songs on Spotify that show off some of that kind of sound, or I should say demonstrate that sound. And it's something I hear in my head is so clear, but it's the 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration.
Yes, indeed.
But I'm just so busy with the other stuff. Like we're recording more Jefferson Starship right now, and podcast and everything. So there's that. And I also, I'd like to maybe do a long form journalism piece, like some kind of book or a nonfiction book, maybe something in the guitar realm, or interview somebody and do their story. So those are probably the 2 main artistic things. And also get Bruce Springsteen on my show.
Yeah, that would be neat. It'd actually be interesting for any of them, Niels or Little Steven or Bruce, to talk about that. It would be interesting to hear, their thoughts, and I'm sure they're all great storytellers. So that would be really good guests.
Absolutely. And I know none of your fans would agree with me, but I think Springsteen is underrated as a guitar player.
Yes.
And I'm very passionate about this because I listen to a lot of guitar players that are incredibly accomplished in terms of being super versatile and knowing how to play jazz and knowing a million songs and knowing how to play fusion and prog and metal and anything and super fancy scale patterns. But I don't like them anymore. And Eddie Van Halen's one of my favorite guitar players, and people think of him as technical. I don't think of him as technical, but he's definitely a virtuoso who does a million different things. And I was very lucky to see him several times. But I get just as much a kick out of, watching Bruce or Neil Young. They kind of remind me of each other. Just like the music is pouring through them so heavily, and they're just hitting like one note.
Yeah.
That passion, if you can get that passion to come through your guitar, and that is way more important than any kind of technical prowess, and making it sing, like Bruce makes the guitar sing, Prove It All Night, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And all the big bends, and Neil Young has that ability too, to just strangle the guitar and make it scream. And then you feel the passion. It's like, it doesn't matter if if it's difficult or not. Like, it's connecting to everybody. And I love that about Bruce. And another thing I love about him, or is this totally nerdy, but sometimes he puts his amps with the cabinets pointing up.
Yeah.
Which is a thing I like to do. A lot of people ask me about it, and they're like, but they must obviously have never seen Bruce, but you can crank up your amp, but it's not like killing anybody because it's just going up into the air.
And very interesting.
Sprays out. Like, it's kind of not dangerous, but it can create an unbalanced sound, even on a big stage. If you have the amps vertical, they're going right at you. Sometimes they go right by your belt, but they're not hitting your ears as much as they're hitting the people right in front at twice the volume of what you're hearing.
Right.
So sometimes you can get a more balanced sound by just shooting it up at the sky. And then if then you can turn it up as loud as you want, and it's not beaming anybody, and it can help the front of house get a better sound. And so that's interesting. So I always love him for that as well.
That's interesting. I had a guest on a few years ago that talked about his first Bruce show was back in like I guess it was in the 80s, early 80s maybe, where it was in Germany. And it's a wonderful episode, but he tells the story. He ends up getting into the rehearsal, the sound check. And he said he's heard Hungry Heart more than anyone else because the band kept playing the introduction and Bruce was going from one part of the auditorium to the other to hear how it sounded. And, the rumor had always been that he cares so much about how the sound was. And this guy says, I don't know if he does it anymore, but at that time I saw him all over to make sure from the very top seat to, everyone was hearing the sound correctly.
I believe it, man. He's one of those energetic people. He gives it 100%.
He really does.
He plays those gigs that I call bladder busters.
Yes.
3 hour long.
Yes. I wonder about that too, because I guess you just plan. I always like if it's going to be a really long movie. Like when I go to the theater, you're like right before, like I'm using the restroom, like, okay, let's drain the bladder as much as I can so that we can go. So I guess that's what the band does. Or I guess they sweat a lot. So maybe that helps,
Oh man, I was interviewing this one guitar player.
Yeah.
And he shall remain nameless because he asked me to take it out of the interview.
Okay.
And you'll never guess which one it was because there's 150 of these interviews up there.
Right.
But he was saying how one show, him and the other guitar players, they had there's a garbage can under the stage and they're wireless. You take a moment and go down there and actually relieve themselves while they're playing the song because there's two guitar players.
Yeah. And
they're all wireless. So
that's more than I want to know.
I've never done anything like that or had to. Thank God.
Yeah. That would be unique. Yeah.
So I guess desperate times, I guess
so. Desperate times. Jude, what have I not asked you that I should have?
I don't even know. But I would say people come on out to a show where we play all over the country. We play everywhere. We got Dallas coming up soon.
Oh, really?
You should come out if you want.
I would. Yeah, I'd love that. I was going to ask, are you guys heading to Dallas soon?
I can't remember the date, but it's maybe is no sooner than March.
Okay.
And I'll send it to you. And then
please do. That'd be great.
We do all that, and check out the record. There's a kind of a fun song on the only live track on Mother of the Sun, which is the new Starship record, is a solo electric piece that I'm playing. It's my own rendition of the famous Jefferson airplane instrumental. It's called a embryonic journey. And I kind of do a special effects electric guitar version of it.
Okay.
Including some of that percussive stuff, and it's kind of a fun moment. I remember we went to Japan and Paul Kantner wanted me to play that song, and he always loved adventurous guitar. He loved it so much. He'd encouraged me. So the original one was only 2 minutes long, played by Jorma Kaukonen, who's now known for Hot Tuna, the band.
Okay.
But so I kind of stretched out, and I think Paul liked to have a good cigarette break too. So it just became a tradition. So that's kind of a nice little moment on that record for guitar heads. It's a lot of fun. What a great opportunity for me just to play it. I mean, I'm so thankful. Any day you get to play guitar, and it's a good day.
So according to Google, Grand Funk Railroad with special guest Jefferson Starship, Saturday, March 12th, 2022. So
is that Dallas?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, so I will be there, my friend. I am looking forward to it.
call me up so I can get you a T-shirt and some tickets and stuff.
All right, I will do that. That sounds great. All right, before I let you go, we got to ask the Mary question. So if you are a fan of Jude's and you are listening to this podcast, first off, thank you. It is greatly appreciated. Jay Armstrong is a honors English teacher, recently retired from the Philadelphia area. And he would, when he was teaching, he would take his honors English class, the seniors, and they would spend 2 days breaking apart the song Thunder Road, looking at all the lyrics, talking about the themes, talking about the imagery Bruce uses. And then at the end of the 2 days, he would ask his class, does Mary get in the car? Jude, that's your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
First of all, what a great set of lyrics, right? And I want to give a shout out to Meatloaf, who we just lost.
Oh, yes. I
went down a rabbit hole because I remember my parents had that record, and I have it now 10 feet from me because I have a lot of the vinyl. I have it somewhere in here. And I had that vinyl record, and so I finally went back and was listening to it. And those epic lyrics that I know that he either co-wrote or wrote with Mr. Steinem.
Yes.
I don't know if I got the name right, but it's I'm not an expert on Meatloaf, but it really struck me as kind of Springsteenian. Like the two of them together have these epic tales of dashboard lights and edgy love stories. But I don't know. I guess, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think she gets in the car.
Okay.
I don't think she does. I think this guy is on a rocket ship, and not everybody wants to go up there. They don't really want to get on. There's a little bit of a crash hazard because he's leaving that town of losers. Doesn't mean she's a loser, but I think he's got a trajectory that he's really. I think his guitar goes with him, but not Mary.
All right. Great answer. Great answer. I love it. About 60-40. 60% say she gets in the car, about 40% says she doesn't. So very nice. Jude,
if she does get in the car, she gets on a Greyhound a couple days later and heads back home. I'll say that.
I've heard that part too.
Definitely.
This has been so amazing. Thank you so much, my friend. This was a great discussion. If someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
Well, I do the Twitter thing, Jude_gold, and that's the same on Instagram, which Instagram is kind of the funnest of the evil the social media platform.
No, I understand that feeling.
I like Instagram, Jude_gold, but I'm also on Facebook, and I have a semi up-to-date website, judegold.com. But just thank you for having me. By this point, you guys know too much about me and are probably ready for the next guest, but
no, not at
really
all.
Appreciate it.
This has been a blast. Listeners, you please stay safe. Go get vaccinated. Go get boosted. Let's all be good to each other because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Thank you, my friend Jude. Thank you, listeners. And we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jesse.
Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.